A body lies there, the concentration of sleeping pills enough to end an elephant, yet the stomach remains unusually clean, not a single fragment, not a trace of pill residue. It was at that moment the forensic pathologist realized a legend had not just passed away, but a horrific truth was beginning to be buried. Welcome to the flip side of Hollywood's velvet curtain, where declassified autopsy reports have torn through the veneer of glamour to expose the naked reality. Why did Superman die with a gun that bore no fingerprints? Why did an icon celebrated for being forever young actually possess a brain shriveled by severe illness years before glamour may blind the living? But the tissues on the operating table do not know how to lie. We will reopen 10 of the most shocking forensic files in history, where hidden scars and exhausted organs begin to speak, to tell the story of the agonizing price the Golden Age stars paid, even as their final breaths flickered out. Among these 10 grim truths whose autopsy report haunts you the most, leave your thoughts below. 1. Marilyn Monroe. The clean stomach. Riddle and power intervention. On the morning of August 5, 1962, the world was rocked by the headline, "The world's greatest sex symbol is gone." Marilyn Monroe was found face down on her bed, her hand still clutching the telephone receiver as if attempting a final, desperate plea for help. Hollywood quickly closed this tragic chapter with a verdict: suicide by overdose. However, as Dr. Thomas Noguchi's scalpel moved through the examination room, he recognized a completely different script, a truth that could not be explained by standard medical logic. Autopsy report number 81,128 recorded a shocking figure. The concentration of pentobarbital sleeping pills in her blood reached 13 mg%. At this level, Marilyn would have had to ingest 40 to 50 pills at once. Yet this is where the riddle begins. Her stomach was completely empty. There were no pill fragments, no excess white crystals, and even the stomach lining showed no irritation, an impossibility for someone who had just ingested a massive quantity of sedative. Dr. Noguchi later exclaimed in doubt, if she had swallowed the pills, the stomach must leave evidence, but here it was unnaturally clean. Marilyn was not merely a star, she was a dangerous pawn on the political chessboard of the Kennedy family and intelligence agencies. Why did the recordings of the calls on that fateful night disappear? Why did the scene show signs of being cleaned before the police arrived? Marilyn's loneliness was not that of an abandoned person, but of an icon surrounded by those claiming to protect her, but who were actually there to control. From FBI agents and her private psychiatrist to her close housekeeper, all appeared on the list of suspects for staging a fake suicide scene to cover up a direct intravenous injection or a sedative enema. Smash meat. Marilyn Monroe's death is the clearest evidence that Hollywood can mold a goddess, but is also ready to turn their corpse into a fraudulent report to protect the secrets of the elite. Her glamour faded into the shadows of manipulation, leaving a forensic file that remains open in the minds of truth seekers for over half a century. However, if Marilyn was a victim of ruthless political machinations, then in another corner of Hollywood there was a woman who endured a tragedy no less cruel. She wasn't assassinated by clandestine forces. Instead, she was murdered by the deep-seated prejudices of the media and the callousness of an industry that worships nothing but perfection. That woman was Rita Hayworth, the love goddess, who was forced to spend her final years burdened by the stigma of being a hopeless drunkard, while the truth hidden within her body was actually a heartbreaking story of vindication. 2. Rita Hayworth, the love goddess and the slander behind a drunkard mask. If anyone could define the enchantment of Hollywood, it was Rita Hayworth. In the film Gilda, the moment she peeled off her black silk glove turned her into the love goddess in the dreams of millions. But there is an unwritten rule in this movie capital: when your beauty begins to fade, the public's compassion vanishes with it. By the 1970s, people began to see a very different Rita. No longer the radiant star she appeared at airports with disheveled hair, a vacant face, and staggering steps. She frequently forgot her lines, became irritably aggressive for no reason, and sometimes laughed to herself in public. Immediately, the tabloids pounced with cruel headlines: "The Drunken Goddess," "The Downfall of an Addict." Hollywood looked at her with cold contempt, treating her like expired merchandise ruined by a dissolute lifestyle. But listen to the belated voice from the medical reports after she took her final breath in 1987. The truth did not lie in bottles of hard liquor. When forensic doctors observed Rita's brain, they were horrified to find shrunken cerebral gyri and severely ravaged neurons. Rita Hayworth was not drunk. She was a victim of early-onset Alzheimer's, a disease that at the time the world was almost entirely ignorant of. This truth was like a slap in the face to the media of that era. Her staggering at airports was actually her nervous system losing control. Her forgotten lines were her memories being erased by deadly protein plaques in the brain. Hollywood had mistaken the pain of illness for depravity. They shunned a woman in her greatest hour of need and pinned a drunkard label on her back until the day she died. Rita's death not only vindicated a life, but also exposed the callousness of the spotlight. They worship you when you are brilliant, but they will trample you if you dare to be unesthetically ill. Yet if Rita suffered from the public's misunderstanding, our next character was crushed by the studio meat grinder, while she was still a mere child. She never had the chance to grow old because her body was squeezed dry in exchange for laughter on the screen. Step into the world of Judy Garland and you will see a 47-year-old body carrying the soul of a starved young girl and the internal organs of an elderly person on the brink of death. 3. Judy Garland, aging from the womb and an exhausted body. In 1939, little Dorothy in her red shoes in The Wizard of Oz led audiences down the yellow brick road to a wonderland. But behind the lens, Judy Garland's reality was a pre-programmed hell. To keep the golden goose awake and thin, MGM Studios applied a toxic regime. They forced her to take stimulants, Benzedrine, to work 18 consecutive hours, then forced her to take sedatives, barbiturates, so she could rest for a few short hours. This cycle of medication not only devastated her psyche, but turned her body into a living laboratory. When Judy passed away in London in 1969 at age 47, the global press used flowery words to bid farewell to a legend. But on Dr. Gavin Thurston's forensic table, those euphemisms vanished, giving way to a horrific reality. The autopsy revealed a heartbreaking truth. Judy Garland passed away with a body weighing only 36 kilograms. At age 47, an age that should still be full of vitality, her internal organs were recorded as completely exhausted, aged and severely damaged like those of a 70-year-old. Dr. Thurston noted that this was the direct consequence of 3 decades of chemical abuse. Every cell, every blood vessel had been squeezed dry in exchange for the smiles and songs on the screen. Judy did not die of a sudden stroke. She died because her body had truly powered down after being subjected to forced labor since childhood. Hollywood created a magnificent Dorothy, but the price paid was a woman stripped of both her childhood and her health, turning her into a medical ruin before she could even reach middle age. Exploitation in the name of art against women is a stain. But Hollywood's cruelty spares no one, not even the icons, with the most rebellious and wild beauty. The next name on this list will take us to a classic accident where James Dean's captivating beauty was crushed into fragments, exposing a catastrophic scene that movie posters never dared to reveal. 4. James Dean, the shattering of a rebel icon and the rejected reality.
His own personal feeling for you. Well, now, he wants to see to it.
On September 30th, 1955, James Dean was speeding down Highway 46 in California, driving the Porsche 550 Spider he affectionately called Little Bastard. He was only 24 years old, having just finished the film Giant. and was fueled by the authentic speed lust of a true rebel. But at the Colame Junction, a Ford Tudor appeared like a ghost of destiny. A horrific head-on collision occurred, and in an instant, the little bastard was transformed into a pile of scrap metal while James Dean became a legend forever. Hollywood always wanted to preserve the image of an eternally beautiful James Dean in the hearts of fans. Subsequent movie posters still portrayed him with dreamy eyes, a red jacket, and an air of defiance. But the press at the time deliberately ignored the reality on the forensic table, where that beauty was ruthlessly decimated. The autopsy report was not nearly as romantic as the way people mourned him. It recorded a catastrophic truth. James Dean suffered an internal explosion. The impact was so violent that his chest was crushed, his jaw fractured, and most crucially, his neck vertebrae were snapped instantly. Forensic doctors confirmed that his internal organs, including his liver and spleen, were completely pulverized under the pressure of the steering wheel. He did not die peacefully, nor did he have any poignant last words like in the sappy movies. It was a brutal dissolution of flesh against the laws of physics. The deeper irony lies in the fact that this very tragic death nourished his career. Hollywood quickly capitalized on the event to turn a talented young man into a saint of loneliness. People worshipped an immortal James Dean on the screen, while the truth of his shattered remains was hidden behind morgue doors as if to protect a money-making brand. Dean's breaking on Highway 46 serves as a grim testament to a cruel rule. Sometimes a star must be completely destroyed before their legend can truly begin. James Dean's death was an accident of speed and youth, a tragedy of impulse. But right in Hollywood, there was another man who also bore the title of Superman, who didn't die on a racetrack, but in his bedroom with a mysterious bullet. We will step into the room of George Reeves, where a gun without fingerprints and strange bruises on the body silently tell the story of a murder plot staged as a rushed suicide. 5. George Reeves, Superman, and the missing fingerprints. On the night of June 16, 1959, in a home in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, a single gunshot ended the life of George Reeves, the man a whole generation of children worshipped as a god in a Superman suit. The police arrived quickly, and within hours the case was closed with a verdict: suicide due to depression over a fading career. Hollywood breathed a sigh of relief that the superhero's image wouldn't be tarnished by a murder case. But looking deeper into the forensic report and the scene that night, a picture full of irreparable fractures begins to emerge. The autopsy recorded that George Reeves died from a single gunshot wound to the head. However, the first anomaly that made later forensic experts raise an eyebrow was the 9mm Luger service weapon. On that murder weapon, the police found absolutely no fingerprints, not even Reeves's own. How could someone who committed suicide wipe the gun clean after pulling the trigger? Furthermore, 3 shell casings were found at the scene, yet there was only one bullet hole in the victim's head. The other 2 bullets were lodged in the floor, but witnesses at the party downstairs swore they heard only one shot. The truth became even more shocking when the forensic pathologist turned the Man of Steel's body over. Fresh bruises appeared on Reeves's face and body, classic signs of a violent struggle right before the shot was fired. Nung chi tiet ne. These details were completely ignored in the preliminary police report, but they tell a very different story of a clumsily staged murder. At a deeper level, Reeves's death was a tragedy of control. At the time, he was trapped in a dangerous extramarital affair with Toni Mannix, the wife of Eddie Mannix, the fixer for MGM Studios. Eddie Mannix wasn't just a powerful man. He was a notorious fixer who could make any scandal vanish with a single phone call. The appearance of those bruises and the clean gun suggests Reeves may have been attacked by a professional, and the suicide label was merely a fresh coat of paint applied by the studio moguls to protect their business empire. George Reeves lived his life in a suffocating Superman suit, only to die in a forced script more cruel than any movie. He didn't die because his career was failing. He died because he dared to challenge the rules of those who held the fate of Hollywood. His body with its silent wounds is the most damning indictment against the rot behind the glamour. Leaving Reeves's gunpowder-scented room, we find an absolute contrast in a woman of pure morning dew beauty. She didn't die from violence or conspiracy, but from a scar of a distant past that silently consumed her amidst a life of luxury. 6. Audrey Hepburn, the invisible scar of famine and the price of slenderness. The world always looked at Audrey Hepburn with the admiration reserved for an angel. Her thin, frail appearance in Breakfast at Tiffany's sparked an aesthetic revolution, replacing voluptuous curves with a fragile, ethereal beauty. But when she passed away in 1993 from a rare form of abdominal cancer, medical reports and later family accounts revealed a heartbreaking reality: that body was not slender by aesthetic choice, but was a ruin ravaged by war. Digging deep into the medical records, doctors noted that Audrey's digestive and lymphatic systems had been irreparably damaged during her teenage years. It was 1944 when the Nazis cut off food supplies to the Netherlands. Audrey, only 15 at the time, survived by eating tulip bulbs and drinking water to soothe the gnawing hunger. Those years of severe malnutrition left invisible scars in her cells. The autopsy showed her body was in a state of chronic anemia, and her internal organs were weakened, making it difficult for her to absorb nutrients even while living in ultimate wealth later in life. Hollywood packaged her pathological thinness and war-torn trauma into a high-fashion trend. Millions of women starved themselves to look like Audrey, unaware that her beauty was built on a foundation of actual pain and starvation. She spent her life as a UNICEF ambassador, traveling to the poorest lands to save hungry children, perhaps because every time she saw them, she saw herself on the forensic table of destiny, a body that was never truly full since the day the war ended. Audrey Hepburn's death serves as a reminder sometimes what we consider the pinnacle of beauty is actually the result of the deepest psychological and physical wounds. She carried those scars beneath her Givenchy gowns, smiling until her final breath, turning her life into a hymn of endurance and compassion. But while Audrey bore her internal wounds for the public's love in another corner of Hollywood, men faced a completely different tragedy. It was the collapse of a perfect appearance, leading to a slow suicide that lasted a decade in the dark. We shall step into the life of Montgomery Clift, where an angelic face devastated by an accident led the way to an autopsy file riddled with the scars of alcohol, drugs, and a despair that offered no escape. 7. Montgomery Clift, the longest suicide in history. In the 1950s, Montgomery Clift was more than just an actor. He was the definition of intellectual beauty and sensitivity. With soulful eyes and a face likened to a masterpiece of creation, Clift was the most formidable rival to Marlon Brando. But it all shattered on a rainy night in 1956 as he drove away from a party at the home of his close friend Elizabeth Taylor. His car slammed into a telephone pole, and as Elizabeth crawled into the wreckage to pull broken teeth out of Clift's throat so he wouldn't choke, she also witnessed the end of a legend. After a series of reconstructive surgeries, Clift returned to the screen with half of his face paralyzed and his features stiff. Hollywood only loves perfection, and this change dealt a fatal blow to his sensitive soul. For the next 10 years, Clift was immersed in the longest suicide in Hollywood history. When he was found dead in his apartment at age 45, the world was shocked. But those close to him understood this death had begun on that horrific night of the accident. Montgomery Clift's autopsy was a heartbreaking summary of devastation. At an age when a man should be at his peak, the forensic record noted a body rotted from the within. His coronary arteries were severely hardened and blocked the consequence of a decade of abusing alcohol and high-dose painkillers to numb both physical and mental agony. His heart was filled with scar tissue, not just from disease, but as a mark of countless small heart attacks that had occurred silently without anyone knowing. Forensic doctors noted that his internal organs looked like those of an 80-year-old man, rather than a middle-aged one. Clift's pain lay in the fact that he had to live in an industry where appearance was everything. When the angelic face vanished, he felt like a stranger in his own life. Every bottle of liquor, every sleeping pill he ingested, was an attempt to erase the image of the stranger in the mirror. His autopsy report didn't just speak of atherosclerosis. It exposed the ultimate loneliness of an artist trapped between a glorious past and a grim reality. The self-destruction of Clift was a tragic sigh of the Hollywood leading man. However, the cruelty of appearance didn't stop at accidents. Sometimes the very effort to be the most magnificent, the most radiant, was the silent weapon that poisoned a person from the very roots of their hair. We shall travel back in time to the original Platinum Muse, Jean Harlow. Behind that hair as radiant as the moon lay a medical secret, steeped in toxins, where beauty was bartered for the very life of a girl just 26 years old. 8. Jean Harlow, Toxic Glamour and the Price of Platinum. In the 1930s, Jean Harlow was not just a star, she was a cultural phenomenon. With platinum hair shining like the moon, she was dubbed Hollywood's first platinum blonde. Millions of women flocked to hair salons to hunt for that legendary hair color. But behind the radiant beauty that captivated the world, Jean Harlow endured a beauty routine that today we can only call chemical torture. To maintain that pure white hue every week, she had to let hairdressers pour a highly toxic bleach mixture of ammonia chlorox and silver nitrate directly onto her scalp. Her sudden passing at age 26, right on the set of Saratoga, was a massive shock. The official verdict at the time was acute kidney failure. However, as modern forensic experts revisit the medical records and examine her end-of-life symptoms, they have found details much more terrifying. In her final days, Jean's breath smelled strongly of ammonia, a sign that her kidneys were no longer able to filter toxins. Many medical theories suggest that years of exposure to highly toxic chemicals on her scalp had seeped into her bloodstream, ravaging her excretory system from the within. But Jean Harlow's tragedy didn't stop with chemicals. Records from Good Samaritan Hospital in 1937 reveal a cruel truth about medical delay. Jean's mother, a devout Christian Scientist, refused to hospitalize her daughter early, believing in faith healing. By the time Jean reached the hospital, the urea levels in her blood had exceeded the threshold of endurance, causing severe cerebral edema. The Platinum Muse took her final breath in ultimate agony, leaving behind a brilliant legacy stained with chemicals and delusion. She was the first and most grim warning of how far humans will go to achieve an artificial standard of beauty. The devastation of chemicals on the body is a silent pain, but Hollywood history has also witnessed the deaths of bodies considered the most perfect, the most powerful, leaving even the most seasoned forensic doctors in shock. 9. Bruce Lee. When water became the killer of a legend. Leaving the distant 1930s behind, we travel to Hong Kong in 1973 to witness the fall of a man considered to possess strength far beyond human limits, Bruce Lee. With a body fat percentage near zero and the ability to throw punches faster than a camera's frame rate, Bruce Lee was the ultimate symbol of discipline and health. Thus, when he collapsed after taking a common painkiller, the world simply could not believe the truth. They spun tales of a family curse, of delayed strikes from rival martial arts masters, or even assassinations by the triad underworld. However, the forensic report from that year recorded a stark physical reality: cerebral edema. The martial arts legend's brain had swollen by 13%, creating immense pressure inside the skull and taking his life within hours. For 50 years, the true cause of this swelling remained a massive question mark, until modern medical research in 2022 presented a hypothesis just as shocking as any conspiracy. Based on an analysis of his lifestyle habits and clinical symptoms before death, doctors pointed out that Bruce Lee likely died from hyponatremia. In other words, he died from drinking too much water. Driven by a frenetic training regimen, the abuse of painkillers affecting his kidneys, and a constant habit of drinking water to purify his body. His kidneys could not keep up with the excretion. The excess water seeped into his brain cells, causing fatal swelling right at the peak of his physical prime. Bruce Lee's death carries a bitter irony. A man who spent his whole life worshiping the philosophy, "Be water, my friend," was ultimately defeated by water within his own body. It proves that even the most perfect machines have fatal weaknesses, and sometimes the hunger to reach absolute limits is the shortest path to destruction. The fall of a martial arts legend was the grief of a generation, but Hollywood still holds one final mystery, a case where 30 years later, the bruises on a body began to speak, telling the story of a fateful night on the vast ocean. We will close this journey with Natalie Wood, where the marks on her arms and neck tore through the conclusion of accidental drowning, to reopen an investigation filled with suspicions of violence and lies. 10. Natalie Wood, The Bruises That Spoke. After 30 years. Natalie Wood, the star of Rebel Without a Cause, always harbored a strange fear of deep water. Ironically, it was the ocean, where she drew her final breath during a foggy night on the yacht Splendor. When her body was found drifting at sea in a delicate nightgown and a down jacket, Hollywood hurried to tie a simple knot: accidental drowning while intoxicated. It was believed she had slipped while trying to retie a dinghy in her disoriented state. However, the truth did not lie on the water's surface, but in what the forensic pathologist found beneath her skin. For 30 years, the original file was left open-ended until the investigation was reopened in 2011, with details that sent shivers through the public. Modern forensic experts re-examining the autopsy photos and initial reports pointed out a series of fresh bruises on Natalie's arms, neck, and wrists. These marks were not caused by hitting the hull or rocks after falling into the water. They were bruises that occurred before she hit the freezing water. Specifically, the scratches and bruises on her neck suggested a forceful physical encounter resembling a struggle or a sudden burst of violence. This detail transformed the accident into a dramatic murder mystery. The ship's captain later admitted to hearing a heated argument between Natalie and her husband, Robert Wagner, right before she vanished. The fact that the cause of death was officially changed by the Los Angeles coroner's office from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors in 2012 was a belated admission the truth had been distorted to protect the most powerful names of that era. Natalie Wood carried the secret of those bruises to the bottom of the deep sea, leaving Hollywood riddled with unanswered questions. Her 30-year silence is a testament to how fame can build paradises, but can also become a grave for the most brutal truths. The journey through the 10 forensic files of Golden Age legends has come to a close, but its echo will certainly make us look at Hollywood through a very different lens. Behind the radiant smiles, the magnificent gowns, and the immortal roles are fragile bodies, squeezed dry by chemicals, ravaged by pressure, and sometimes buried by power conspiracies. The forensic table does not know how to lie. It does not care how many Oscars you hold or how many fans are screaming your name. It records only one singular truth. The price of fame is sometimes life and human dignity itself. Hollywood created the gods, but it was these autopsy reports that returned them to the true form of broken human beings. Among the 10 grim truths we have just explored, which star's forensic report left you feeling the most stunned and haunted? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and follow to join me in uncovering other naked hidden corners behind the spotlight. Thank you for listening.